Good morning. I'm Emily Akhtarzandi, Managing Director of Atlantic Live. Welcome to Crunching the Numbers, an Atlantic forum on data analytics and tomorrow's workforce. Data is fast becoming ubiquitous in today's economy. It's not just a tech sector phenomenon anymore. Whether tracking consumer trends or looking to internal statistics for insight, businesses and governments alike depend on data to help them make decisions. And here's a staggering statistic. More data was created in the last 2 years than in all of human history combined. But if we're swimming in data, we're not swimming in data scientists. And in fact, some estimates suggest that the American economy alone will have close to 300,000 data science jobs left unfilled by 2018, despite the fact that job applicants with data analytics skills can earn considerably more than their peers. How is data shaping the economy, entrepreneurship, and the workforce? And what strategies are businesses and higher education institutions using to prepare workers for this emerging numbers-driven reality? So we've got a great group of leaders in higher education, business, and entrepreneurship here with us this morning to help us tackle these questions. And I'd like to take a moment to thank our underwriters, the Business Higher Education Forum, and PwC for making this conversation possible. Before we get started, please silence your cell phones, but keep them on and join us on Twitter using our hashtag #AtlanticDataAnalytics. We want you in the room to be a part of the question, and we'll have plenty of time for questions throughout the program from the audience. So now let's begin our morning. We'll hear about the future of data in business and what that means for the workforce. So please join me in welcoming to the stage Dane Lin, Vice President of the Business Roundtable, Tanya Moore, Director, IBM Career and Skills, and Marco Annunziata, Chief Economist of GE, and my colleague, the Atlantic's Washington Editor-at-Large, Steve Clemens, is here to lead the discussion. Steve, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Emily. So this hashtag, Atlanta Data Analytics, I just need it. That is a long hashtag. Who are our tweeters? I just want to extend an apology to all of those who are really tweeting, because that takes a lot out of the 140 characters. So I'm just sending a little signal here. I just want to start here for a minute and go out to all of you here. I was talking to, it's Tessia Garner with the Bureau of Labor BLS. It's early, and I haven't had enough Pete's. But I wanted to start this morning with you before we're going to have a lot of sessions here today. And I'm interested, this is a packed house on data analytics in Washington, D.C. at sort of 8 in the morning. So what question is burning with you that you'd most like to get answered today? Because I'm going to come back to that several times. I have no idea what she's going to say, but what's your zinger question?
I want to know how we can prepare the students today for their careers tomorrow in this field, and not just in computer science, but all across, like economics, biology, history. I think it's going to inundate the entire field of education.
That's great. So that's the entire subject of panel 2, so don't go away. And Brian is at GW University here. I can say that. Brian, what's your big question?
I help manage the data science program at GW, and one of the things that we struggle with is...
So what are you failing in?
Not that I hope my students are passing everything, but I'm not sure. So one of the things we struggle with is bringing in new technologies in the classroom to kind of keep up with the pace of what's going on in the industry. Specifically, one of the things we're trying to do is bring in more technologies focused on streaming data. So if you guys could talk about, IoT and real-time data analysis and the tools used for streaming.
I think that's a Marco thing. We'll be right back to that. And Mary Dunaway from the University of Virginia.
Yes, I'm Director of Data Science Programs in the College of Continuing Professional Studies, and I'm tasked with starting a new program for those that already have an undergraduate degree but want to upskill into data analytics. So I'm looking for some understanding of some core skills that the industry is looking for someone who wants to retool and take on a role in data analytics.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mary. Thanks, everybody. I mean, we'll get to questions with everyone as we go on. But Mary just left us with exactly the topic of this panel, which is what are the skills that are required out there, and how do you set it up? And so, Dane, let me start with you. Sure. You know, what do you think is the deficit out there? What are we trying to fix this morning that needs attention? And you know, you're with a Business Roundtable, and you're trying to sort of raise the profile and raise the prominence of this particular agenda item. Why does it matter?
Well, first of all, hashtag BLS. That's a good one. Much shorter. But let me first say thank you for the opportunity to be on the panel. And I think for those of you that don't know Business Roundtable, we're a CEO organization. Our companies represent $6 trillion in revenue and invest $80 million in training. Why is this an important issue for the Business Roundtable and CEOs? In large part because, as many of you have heard, we have these 5.5 million jobs that we can't fill. And I would say from a recent survey that the Business Roundtable did of their members, we have two fundamental problems. One are, no surprise, some of the hard skills. And yes, reading and mathematics are a fundamental problem that we're seeing even with undergraduates, but we're seeing a more fundamental problem in the preparation of undergraduates and high school students who don't have some of the basic STEM skills. And by STEM skills, I don't mean a STEM degree or a STEM diploma. I mean, I'm talking about fundamental science, technology, engineering, math skills. But
Let me just ask you a quick question about that, Dane.
Yeah.
I have heard that comment about STEM skills probably for 30 years. When you come up here to imagine a panel 20 years ago, that same statement might have been made. And so if that's true, why do you think we're so poor at correcting the problem? What is the gap that needs to be filled there?
Well, I think what you would hear from some of our members is that, and I won't start by pointing the finger at others, I think we've not done a particularly...
Don't point it at IBM and GE, please.
We'll point back.
They're members. I'm not going to point a finger at my members. But one of the problems is that industry hasn't done a particularly good job of sending clear demand signals. What are the competencies they need in the employees that they're trying to recruit? So I think that's one of the purposes behind the survey and all the other work that we're doing, not just among ourselves, but with community colleges, high schools, four-year colleges and universities, to send clear demand signals on what are the skills, very specifically, that we need in industry so that we're not remediating all the time. But beyond the hard skills, I think one of the bigger problems that you hear our members talk about are what some might call the soft skills. We call the attributes. I mean, the ability to think critically, the ability to problem solve, and the ability to write well. I mean, those are some of the bigger challenges. And some of our CEOs would say, if you're not quite up to snuff on the hard skills, we can get you there and teach you the GE way. But it's more difficult to get you up to speed if you're not open to working with others and taking a leadership role on a project. So I think those are some of the challenges that our members face.
Tanya, how many employees do you have?
400,000.
So you're responsible internally, not only for the continuing education, but also kind of bringing in, I mean, if there was a data science center in the world, it would be IBM. Maybe Marco will dispute that in a moment. But when you're going out both to hire in workers, to attract workers into this area, you're out there and have feelers all over for the best talent you can sort of look at in the country, but you're also trying to reskill and deal with how you up the game for people that are in-house. I've been reading both about IBM and companies like AT&T and GE have the same challenges. So what's on your dashboard that you think, because I'm interested in where people are here and they want to hear how we fix a problem.
Right.
So how do you fix the problem?
And so we're really taking a couple-prong approach. And the first approach is to look at that external workforce. And this really connects with what you were saying, Dane, around we have to do as an ecosystem, as a economy, a better job of preparing the people that are coming out of college, or even the people that aren't college type people for whatever reason. Maybe they go to community college, or maybe college isn't their thing. But what we're really looking for is trying to help people gain the skills that they need to be able to have a profession in IT. And so many of those skills that Dane mentioned around those harder skills, which are fairly easy to teach, and those softer skills. So are you inquisitive? Can you critically problem solve? Can you work with teams? Are you innovative? So we're developing new collar programs to really change employment. Bring people in, that are not typically, you wouldn't typically consider for a role in IT, but that have been very successful. And I have a couple examples I can share. The other piece of that is upskilling our current workforce. So more and more, we're seeing the talent market change. So I think all of you, and I'm sure you would concur with this, it's harder and harder to get the skills that we need. And so going out into the market is one way to do it, but we're really starting to look at our build versus buy strategy. And we, as well as many other companies, are focusing more heavily on making sure that we're investing in our current workforce and upskilling them. And we're using digital credentials to do that. So if you're not familiar with digital credentials, it's really a way to signal to the workforce and to people coming into the workforce the skills that are most valued by IBM, and more importantly by our clients. And that really helps people to understand this is the type of skills
Tanya,
you would
where
need
is
to grow.
that? Like if somebody's interested in sort of chasing down what digital credentials
Yep.
Have greater returns than others,
Yep.
where do they go find that? Do they go to IBM.com and
So
there's a little hat,
we have it on our website.
Really?
And in the
I
past,
didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, I won't fault you for that.
Yeah.
We have it on our website, and we're not the only company doing it. So I would suggest that we're leading the way, but Microsoft is doing it, and we're seeing it in community colleges that are starting to offer these for credit. Penn State, so everything from Penn State to community colleges are starting to really do a better job of signaling to the workforce the skills that you need.
So I want to jump to Marco for a second, and all of you, and feel free to jump on this. But so let me ask the cynical, mean question: Is there just sort of a temporary gap and a deficit on the sort of data skill sets gap that is going to be filled by Watson and filled by AI, artificial intelligence, and that we're going to fill it with automation and other capacity down the road, but we temporarily need people, so you seduce them into this track, but like because the Atlantic did programs all around the country on kind of the revival of manufacturing, new community partnerships, what was happening, and you would meet a kind of former generation of people who weren't thrilled that their children were being asked to go to manufacturing because they felt like it was a false promise. And so I'm just interested in the false promise dimension, whether there is anything in that with this, that because there is such a deficit, machines will eventually fill it. So tell me where I'm wrong, as Rachel Maddow would say.
So
She says it less and less, by the way. Just go ahead.
I think from my perspective, will automation help to really reduce some of the workload? Absolutely. But what we have found is we have introduced more and more cognitive functions within our workforce solutions. And whether that's, how many people in demand roles, how do we compensate them, how do we do proactive retention, and it's using analytics underneath that.
Right.
But what we have found is if you rely solely on the data and not have that human interaction, that human intervention to confirm that your data is accurate, you're missing a huge piece of success. So I don't think it's a false hope.
Marco?
Yeah, what's your perspective?
Yes, let me take this on as well as the issue of why are we not doing a better job at signaling the skills we need. But first, let me extend my apologies to the BLS, because if your website ever crashes, that's me. and I apologize. I want to apologize. I don't think it's a temporary need, because what is happening now is not just an acceleration in artificial intelligence and computing. It's the coming together of digital and industrial. So what you need to get is a new set of skills that combine industrial capabilities with digital data analysis, data science capabilities, and those will always be needed. So the jobs that are being created in manufacturing are not just a filler for the time when artificial intelligence will take a big piece of it. They are new jobs which combine both skills. I mean, two pieces of evidence on this. One is at GE, we are probably at the forefront of introducing these digital technologies into the industrial world. And over the last 8 years, we've created close to 20,000 new jobs. So we're not replacing people with machines. The other part is, which connects with the question of...
So let me stop. So 20,000 new jobs in the scheme of GE or global affairs is so tiny.
No,
with all due respect, it's not?
It's not. 20,000 new jobs in the US, where we have a footprint of just over 100,000 people. It's not small peanuts at all. Especially in the current environment of relatively muted job growth. If you look at the big picture, by the way, in the US, we now have 5.5 million jobs more than at the peak of employment before the crisis. So all the hype about technology already destroying jobs, I think is overhyped, which doesn't mean we shouldn't be worried about the transition and how we signal the need for the right skills. On that, I think part of the reason why we have, as companies, we have difficulties in signaling what skills do we need is that technology is changing fast. So companies themselves need to understand how the jobs are changing and how we have to rebuild the new skills. And part of it needs to be done in-house. So today, for example, we're announcing a new program of brilliant learning, where essentially what we're saying is, starting with supply chain and then extending it to most of our workforce, we're going to bring new levels of training to our people. Some of it is going to be through online courses, some of it through 2-3-day programs of hands-on training.
Do you do this internally, or do you contract with like Coursera or something like that?
We're going to do this internally, because it's also going to be very focused on hands-on experience, where you come in from the factory floor and we give you the tools, the 3D printers, the various digital tools which are coming into the factory, and train you on that. And then we're going to bring in external experts to stress test our experience and help us figure out how to do it better. And we're partnering with universities and community colleges to strengthen the link.
So hold that thought. Is it Mary I was talking to? Is it Mary? Yeah, Mary. So Mary was asking, really the question about the bridge. What sorts of, crystal ball future do you see that can be connected with the university so that they can better track that? And that's in part what part of the next conversation is. But all of you are on business. You're on the demand side of this. She's on part of the supply side. Yeah. And I'm interested, if you were to have, infinite power, what would be the elements that you'd like to fix in that connectivity between those that are providing, Brian and Mary, that are providing, young people going into this area, and then the kind of corporate scene and those that are hiring and creating? What are the pieces that need to be fixed?
I would just do more on-hands cooperation. So as we are doing with some of the community colleges, we're doing it with Purdue University, we have joint programs where we have students and some of our scientists and engineers.
Is this sort of like a guild approach?
It's kind of a guild approach. It's kind of a replacement apprenticeship program where you combine studying with factory work. And you do it together. You develop products together, and you figure out together the new skills which are needed. Because we see some of it, but we don't have the same lens that educators and students will have. So if we can work together, they will see things that we don't. And I think together, this is how you create the best curriculum and also the best link between the schooling side and the training side.
Dane?
I think it's interesting because of the shortage, which many predict in the next 10 years will go from 5.5 million to 11 million.
Right.
That you're seeing much stronger partnerships between the supply side and the demand side.
Absolutely.
I mean, GE is yet one example, but if you look at SAS, a data analytics company down in North Carolina, they have worked with a number of colleges and universities around the country to create undergraduate and graduate curriculums in data analytics. I would argue that SAS is a very good example of trying to replicate a model at scale. So rather than trickling out 30 graduates here or 30 graduates there, in a field where there is such significant demand, they're producing thousands of students. But you also can look at the work that Northrop Grumman is doing in cybersecurity out at College Park. And helping, and Northrop Grumman hasn't just cut a check. Northrop Grumman has sent executives in to actually help define what the curriculum is. And that helps ensure, I think, on the supply side, the students, that when they actually start to interview and get hired, that they aren't in the remedial courses, that the resume didn't just look good, but they actually have the competencies to succeed in the workplace. So I think there are lots and lots of examples from BRT members that are trying to actually create the partnerships to engage directly in curriculum, provide real-world case studies that are embedded in the curriculum, to provide not just internships, but meaningful work-based learning opportunities.
Right.
Because if you look at some of our companies, the internships and the apprenticeships are happening much earlier. I don't know about IBM and GE, but if you get hired as an intern in the summer of your sophomore year, you're asked to come back in the junior year. And at the end of your
Dan,
junior
with all
year,
due
you get
respect,
hired.
I mean, this all sounds great, but I think that one of the interesting challenges is how do you get more? Because a lot of this is talking about what everyone's doing proactively now, right? You've got internships, opportunities, working with colleges and universities. But what really, I think, is driving the conversation today is that even with that, we're projecting enormous deficits. And it reminds me when Intel Corporation invested and put a big chip plant into Rio Rancho, New Mexico. One of the things that they tested is whether they could get the pipeline of talent that could come in, and it was on the edge. I mean, it was really uncertain. So they made major investments in UNM and New Mexico State University and various community colleges because you had to get an ecosystem of talent. Other companies came in as well and began doing that, and so they had to kind of take ownership of an enormous number of things far beyond their business and change the ecosystem and culture there. And even so, I guess what I would like to challenge you, Tanya and Dan and Marco, is what can fill the deficit really beyond the things that are going on now. And I know that's a big lift, but we're here to talk about big lifts. So what changes the incentive structure for a young person to decide to go take Brian's course? He looks like a cool guy, but he might want to go the lawyer track instead. Or how do you change the incentive structure so that more people say data science is the right track for them? Tanya?
So I have a couple thoughts on
And
that.
do you agree with the premise?
I do, and I think that it's a couple of things. I think it's the ecosystem, the supply and demand coming together to recognize that collectively we have a shortfall and that collectively we have to solve it. So we have an education program that's been very consistent with New York Public School called P-TECH. And we've learned a lot through that, where we're educating some of the high school students. They're coming in and getting apprentices with us. Other companies have these programs. The challenge is I think we need to do that at scale, which is going to require very, very different relationship with the supply and the demand side. I think the other thing that we have to think about is that some people are just naturally interested in STEM. But let's be honest, a lot aren't. So when you talk to them about go take that course, they're like, eh. I think we really have to rethink how we're selling these courses to people. So when you talk to young people, they want to be a rapper. They want to be in fashion. They want to, and the thing is though, you can teach them core STEM skills talking to them in that language. So, okay, come on, let's show you how you can leverage this and how you can use coding and just basic project management to do that. So I think some of it is also shifting how we're presenting this to them and the curriculum and connecting it to what we need as a business.
But I think it's not just data science, because if you think of the big lift of filling this projected gap in jobs, which by the way is going to get worse because when we look at our industries, whether it's oil and gas or transportation, we have an aging workforce which is about to retire, and there is no pipeline of skills ready to fill it. What you also need is a pipeline of people with traditional factory work skills like welding, combined with some familiarity with iPads and computers, which today everybody has. And I think the big gap that we have to fill is that of vocational education in between high school and college. And you can fill it with formal courses, you can fill it with a more flexible structure, but that is the missing gap because
Marco, I mean, you have this fantastic Oklahoma accent, but I do know you know about the world. When you look at all GE's operations around the world, is there anywhere else that's getting it right and that the United States could learn from, given your profound international exposure?
I think the best example is Germany. Because in Germany, factory skills and industrial skills are extremely highly regarded. There is a strong connection between schools and the world of industry. And people want to do those jobs because they know they're good jobs, they pay well, and the skills gap is much smaller than it is here.
Dane, before I go to the audience...
Before you ask another question, actually,
Yeah.
let me take over the role as moderator. So there are 2 points I want to make. One is career technical education.
Right.
I mean, we need to do a better job of using real-time labor market data and looking at that data and figuring out whether or not the programs in those career technical centers are providing opportunities to build that pipeline.
Right.
We have, in my opinion, too many cosmetology and food preparation courses in those career technical centers. The second issue that I haven't heard us talk about...
Is there a good clearinghouse for that information?
There is not. I mean, there's some national associations that are doing some good work in this area. Some of the recent investments that J.P. Morgan Chase has been making, I think, have promise in states and cities around the country. But the second point is, as we talk about building the pipeline, we shouldn't limit our thinking to the high school students. There are a number of dislocated workers out there who are looking to rebuild their skills and get back into the workforce. And they're not all 60 years old. And I think as we think about filling this gap, we're not going to fill the gap with the high school students. We need to fill the gap with the high school students and the individuals that are trying to get back in.
We even have a couple of really cool examples of that. A gentleman that was a fast food worker, and he took a Cisco certification. He's now employed with IBM in Houston. There was a woman who was a teacher and decided that she really wanted to do something different. You know, and she's now a cybersecurity specialist with us. So I think your point's very well taken on that.
Wonderful, thank you very much. And you want to stay and moderate the next session? Let me open up to the floor now. We've got a question right up here. Do we have a mic? Emma will give you the mic.
Stand up and say your name.
And tell us who you are.
Oh, I'm Joe Reddix. I'm in IT program management. One of the things we've been working on with the federal government is the mobility services team. Mobility is key to integrating massive amounts of information to the public. And since a lot of our cultures are heavy into things like cell phones and things like that, and tablets, watch, the idea of being able to solve your acquisition problem for new resources, the ability to gauge how well your strategy is working in education and things like that, and to find out what works and what doesn't work. My question is this. When the federal government does things right, how important do you believe or feel the private sector has as an obligation to work with them? In other words, the mobility services team, for example, is mobility across all federal government. It touches everything that you guys have been talking about in the last few minutes, okay?
Great. Dane, thoughts, reactions, since you run the biggest association on the private sector side. So when the government gets something right, what's your obligation to bring your folks in?
First of all, I run nothing. I think we have an obligation, I think we have an obligation on the front end as well. And to help, in some cases, to instigate. So I think one of the issues I would put on the table is, trying to encourage, actually more than encourage, the use of this Pell surplus and get summer Pell, workforce Pell, so that individuals can extend the use, have a financial incentive to extend their course of study and beyond 2 semesters and get into the workforce more quickly. And we need to nudge Congress in this case to move fast on these 2 issues that I think have bipartisan support. But we also need a bigger term agenda. We don't need to fix just the problem we have today. We need a long-term solution as a country. And I think that's where we have a responsibility, and many of our CEOs are engaged with the administration, not just the White House, but with Congress, to figure out how are we going to work together on the development of these ideas, but most importantly, how are we going to work together to implement them and implement them at scale?
Tanya, do you and Marco have 30 seconds each on this?
So what I would say is we really believe that new collar jobs, so people that are coming out of untraditional backgrounds, whatever they are,
Right.
is a new model of employment. And I think in order to make that work, we have to partner with the federal government. We have to better partner with education. And I think it's also city and local government too, because when you think about some of those internship programs, et cetera, a lot of that happens at the local level. So I really do believe it's an ecosystem.
Right.
I would just second the last statement that Tanya made, which is I think the cooperation with government overall is extremely important. At the local level, it is especially important because that's where you make a big difference and you can experiment.
Right.
Other question. You're right here in the middle.
Hi, Luann McNabb. I'm with the National Council of Teachers of English.
Oh, great.
And I understand writing skills are important in speaking. Can you address, are you working with departments and faculty or high school teachers of English in what you're doing?
So I think in our perspective, we are, but I think we have an opportunity to have those closer partnerships. So in our P-TECH program, we're working within the school to understand what skills they have, what skills they don't, and where there are gaps. And like Dane said, it's not all technical skills. We find that we can teach those skills. It's really more of the behaviors and the softer skills that we find, customer service, those types of things are things that we need to do.
It's the package.
Yep.
Right.
So yes, but I think we have an opportunity to do more.
I think one of the things, just, if we had more time, it'd be interesting, is that because there is a movement that says, just like English is sort of the bloodline of communication, whatnot, maybe coding and other kind of STEM-related activity need to be taught on the same level. It'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on that, whether you look at that as something you welcome or something that looks as a challenge. I think it's one of the most interesting questions out there. Yes, right here on the corner.
Aida Awad, Einstein Distinguished Educator Fellow. And you mentioned the fact that you thought there was a disconnect between the types of courses being offered in CTE programs and what the workforce really needs. And I would suggest that there's a need for upscaling those teachers as well and their skills. And I'm wondering what your suggestions and thoughts are about doing that.
Boy, she hit the hot button. Okay. What do you think, Marco?
So, and again, I think the first step of the solution for upskilling the teachers is bringing the teachers into the factory floors, into the different environments of the economy, so not just manufacturing, not just the factory floors. The second part is leveraging technologies to make sure that teachers can be more interactive, more effective with the students, but also can keep themselves up to speed. I was saying earlier that it's tough even within industries to keep up with the innovation. I think the link is needed so that teachers and industrialists and everybody else can constantly learn. So constant learning is for all of us, not just for the
Ryan,
workers.
Mary, have you visited factory floors and done what he said? You want to? You want to visit a
She said
GE
no.
plant? Mary, yeah? You've done it? There you go. You've got, are you open to that?
Definitely,
Good.
yes.
It'd be interesting.
That's what we do at the Atlantic. We broker relationships.
I think your point is well taken, though. Let's remember that it's not just, and I don't think you meant this, but it's not just the teachers who are currently in the workforce, but how, as part of their pre-service, their teacher preparation programs, that we're giving them the opportunities to go to NASA and work with the scientists. So there are lots of boutique examples of innovation, but we need to scale those up.
Tanya, last word.
So I think we have a huge opportunity here. I think it's a partnership, but if I think about the impact that we can make for people that wouldn't have these opportunities otherwise, I think we can impact people and families on a very personal level and our economy on an even more broad level.
Let me thank Dane Lynn of the Business Roundtable, Tanya Moore of IBM, and Marco Nunziata of GE and Oklahoma. Thank you guys very much for joining us. Great, thank you.
Thank you again to Dane, Tanya, and Marco. And up next, we have 3 university leaders discussing where data analytics fits into the curriculum. And joining Steve on stage will be, welcome, Eduardo Padron, president of Miami-Dade College, Catherine Rowe, Provost of Smith College, and Freeman Rabowski, President of University of Maryland, Baltimore County. And Steve Clemens will lead again. Thank you.
Great to be with all of you, and I just want to mention that Tessa, you asked the question of saying, okay, what can we do in the universities, the colleges, the teaching, and this session is the art and science of teaching, and I just have to say first, good to see you, my friend.
Good to see you.
Catherine at Smith College has the coolest thing I think will come up today is that she has an app on Shakespeare. I don't know what the connection is to data science, but you're going to provide it this morning.
I can do that.
But you're going to have to tell us where to download it, but it's how an interactive app with Shakespeare, which is in the Folger library thing. So that's totally cool. And I just want to say my hat's off. But let me start off. Eduardo, I know that you are, just in the spirit of full transparency, you're on the board of BHEF, and just want to put that on the table. But you also run one of the largest community college system in America. And you and I have had opportunities to talk before. And as I've seen Miami-Dade, you have created pockets of opportunity just virtually in almost every corner. And I guess what I'm interested in this morning is a huge turnout this morning for an early morning in Washington, D.C., where most people are still struggling to get into their 10 a.m. Hill meetings or whatever. But so this is obviously a priority here. But how does it weight for you as a priority given the vast number of things that you have in the largest system? Where does data science, data analytics, building this capacity fit within Eduardo Padron's universe?
Well, it's extremely important because as far as I'm concerned, data analytics is taking over the world. There is not a single business or industry that doesn't depend on analytics to basically conduct their business. It's a smart way to do it. You need to have information. You need to make decisions based on good data, and data analytics provides that. We have created a lot of opportunities. In talking before we came in to Catherine and Freeman, I was telling them that we're working our way to make data analytics a requirement for every major, every discipline, because I really feel that it applies everywhere. So that's important. It's not only having the baccalaureate in data science, but making sure that it's widespread and all the students are exposed to it, because they're going to need it. And what we find is not only the 18 and 19-year-old students coming into the school, but there are a lot of people in the workforce that in order to keep their jobs, in order to really advance in their jobs, they need to have the knowledge that is necessary today to be useful to the employer. So what we find is a lot of people coming back to school to try to get the skills that are necessary. And we're putting together boot camps and all kind of programs to provide them with that knowledge.
Are people jumping at it? Are they or are they looking at, oh, wow, Eduardo's going to come force us to do all of this? I mean,
No,
are they resisting or are they swimming, gleefully along towards these programs?
No, I find that people, the more they know about this, the more they want to do it, because they know that the demand in the jobs is real. And it's important, and for us it's even more important because we have employers that not only are looking for people with the skills, but they are looking for people, diverse population of well-trained employees, and that's what we specialize in. Most of the students that we are putting into these programs come from minority groups, come from underrepresented groups, and that's really providing them a significant edge in getting the jobs that are needed and supporting their communities and really advancing in the field.
Freeman and Catherine, you both run large schools, and you've created no institutional commitments to data science that are deep in whole programs, majors, and degrees. Let me just ask you both: Are people jumping at this, or are they finding this a novelty? Because I think part of the, after the last session, what you get is we're trying to shift the equilibrium where the perceived value, the incentive structure to get more people going down this track. And I'm interested in, from your perspective, when you're kind of bringing this in to the university environment, I'm going to go back to Tessa's question, how do you get people to want what you're now offering?
It's gone faster at Smith than I've seen any change in curriculum. We have a major that's in statistical and data sciences that's a year old. There are 86 students in the entry class, the intro class, and there are a couple of reasons why it started so quickly. One was we had a wonderful partnership with Mass Mutual, a real alignment. As Eduardo is saying, there's an enormous opportunity for women of color, for women, for first-generation students in this field. It's wide open as a STEM field in a way that many STEM fields are not. I can talk about that in a little, but we found that it matched a liberal arts curriculum extraordinarily well because the toolkit is really three things. It's technical knowledge in programming, computational modeling. It's facility with statistics and math. So those are the sort of 2/3 between those two of our major. But it also requires domain knowledge in any field, humanities, social sciences, the sciences. And a full third of our major is that domain knowledge. We have faculty rotating through our intro course from the humanities and the social sciences and the sciences partnering with the STEM faculty who can teach computational modeling and statistics. And there are probably, I think you may see this, there's two kinds of jobs our students are going into from here. One is, I'm a data scientist, and I'm going to go work for Google or in the tech sector. But far more common, and I suspect represented in this room, is I'm a history major, econ, English, gov. I got a job in a think tank or in media. And I am the most technical person on my team because I took a stats course. And so everyone on my team wants me to do the analysis of all the data that's coming to us, uncurated, unsystematically gathered. And I've got more skills than anybody else does in this area, but I'm not really trained to bridge that important question in our field and the data that we have. So our major is designed to have students practice that bridging work between partnering with domain experts. That's the work they're going to be doing when they go into the workforce. They will partner with domain experts.
Freeman?
Yeah, I agree completely with my colleagues. I want us to think about revamping the culture in not just in higher education, but in our country. We were all trained to think about coming up with a hypothesis, and then you test the hypothesis. Well, no, today, more and more, we're going to be looking at the data and determining the hypotheses from the data. It's a very different approach. And so whether talking about the coursework, and for us, half of our students are in STEM. You start there from 100 countries. But the humanities, the social sciences, data science across the board. One of my recent PhD graduates is now head of data science at Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab. And what I would say is this, that whether we're talking about people who will be quant types at T. Rowe Price, or we're talking about people in cybersecurity at the National Security Agency. So from financial to healthcare, any sector of society, we're going to need people trained in these areas. And the level of training will depend on that person's sophistication with stat and programming and computing. Perhaps the most exciting program I could mention, undergrad through PhD, would be a middle school program for girls in programming and yoga, if you can imagine. Now, when they laugh, I'd say you'd be surprised who's sponsoring that program. It's the National Security Agency. Why? Because we need many more women who are well prepared to come in and take advantage of
this. This is a tweetable moment. So the NSA is sponsoring and yoga at UMBC?
At UMBC and in programming, because we have far too few women majoring in computer science. We've gone from 36% of the women in our country who are, of the majors in computer science being women in the 80s, down to 18% today. So, I mean, fundamentally, unlike other countries where you've got half the population who are in technical areas being women, in our country, under 20% of those trained as techie types, and start there, computer sciences are women. But secondly, with this data science, it's not simply a matter of the computer science major or the statistics major. It is people who can use the domain, whether it's in literature, with text and evaluating the text, or for us in digital humanities or imaging and digital arts. You know, in all those disciplines, we need people with grounding in data science. And the way we've been able to get more and more people understanding that everybody should be doing this is you look at the jobs that are available today. They require more and more understanding of data science.
NSA sponsoring a programming and spinning class?
Well,
or,
let's say this. Now, you see, you put the emphasis on the wrong thing. The emphasis was on the programming. Get the tweet right. Yoga is, and the reason for the yoga, quite frankly, is that it builds confidence.
Let me ask you another question. I know you were on a major advisory board
Yes.
on national education
Yes.
For African Americans with President Obama. When you were there and you would raise these issues, what is the, I mean, because partially the three of you are here today to kind of give us a snapshot of what's going on in the kind of broad university. How does, again, I guess the same question that I asked Eduardo is, to what degree is this looked at as a key priority at higher education, and how are, and what's the performance of various universities and colleges around the country in moving in this direction? Is it uneven? Is it ambitious? Is it, and be honest.
There are two things I would say. Eduardo and I are partners in this work. He chairs the commission, the White House Commission on Educational Excellence for Hispanics. I do for African Americans, and I was enjoying Catherine's expertise in looking at women in these issues. So these three groups, if you think about it, represent a major part of our population. I would say this about the work that we did. We saw the important role of, first of all, of pre-K as being critical to everything else in our society. But the reason I brought up the middle school work is that one of the challenges we face is that 2/3 of Americans who begin with a major in STEM are wiped out, end up not succeeding. And you say it's a K through 12 problem. That's a part of it. But the other part of the problem is that, quite frankly, it's almost counterintuitive. The higher the test scores, the more prestigious the university, the greater the probability that someone who begins in STEM will leave it within the first year or two, because the student gets a C in chemistry and leaves it immediately. And so we have a big problem with only 5% of Americans with bachelor's degrees in the natural sciences and engineering. You start there. And when you think about data science, you have to think about those who are going to be very quantitative and technical, and then others who will be broadly educated with the data science.
So how would you shift those
And so what we've worked to do is to redesign the teaching and learning process and to change our mindset. The problem, and I say this as a mathematician for over 40 years, the problem in STEM is that so many of us, and I say this in my TED Talk, so many of us in STEM think that STEM is only for a few people. We tend to think that if you're not really good, and then the other part of the problem is, if I ask this audience the question, how many of you knew by the time you were in the 11th grade that you either a math science type or you are a history English type?
Let's just ask,
how many of you by the time you're in the 11th grade, you were the math science type or you are history English and arts
This is
type?
an audience that would be, look, it's all math science.
And now you got a few nerds like her and me who like both. I mean, a few nerds like that. But most people are going to say exactly what you said. And it's because we actually push kids to think that way, that if you don't get it like that, it's not for you, you see?
Catherine?
So the three of us could talk for a very long time about underrepresentation of minorities, of women, of immigrants, of first-generation students in STEM fields. I think one of the things that's really important here is that if you look at stats, that's been far more hospitable to women historically than computer science has. Its culture, like computer science, is, though, relatively stable. Data science is wide open. It's wide open professionally in all of the industries represented in this room. It's an emerging job. It's a job that's open to be defined. It's a culture that's open to be defined in higher ed as well. And so we see at Smith an enormous opportunity right now to shape what the culture of data science will be, and to have women and women of color leading that process of establishing a culture of data science. I think you're thinking in the same ways.
Absolutely, and part of the issue is that, for the longest time, we institutions have worked very much in isolation of the real world.
Right.
And so we have the well-deserved ivory tower designation. What I find today, which is very, very encouraging, is the fact that the disconnect that has existed between business and higher education, we're getting closer together. My Bachelor of Science in Data Science was only made possible through a significant collaboration with industry. In more ways than one, not only the development of the curriculum, but also in terms of providing internship opportunities for the students, identifying faculty, having faculty on loan from business to teach in the program, and a number of other things that really made it possible for us to have a program that is really conducive to the student having real opportunities for jobs. And that has made all the difference in the world. It really has a potential positive impact on the faculty. And these are programs like any other program that needs constant updating. The world is moving so fast that what you create today, 2 years from now, may not be necessarily what you need to be teaching. So being able to constantly be updating the curriculum requires constant communication with business and industry. And that kind of collaboration we're seeing more and more at institutions, and I think it's a welcome change, because after all, we're all on this together. And the demand and the supply have to meet at some point and make sure that we're making sense.
Let me ask, I like, Freeman, how you framed this issue about in the future we're going to be drawing our hypotheses from data sets. If there were to be a data set that looked at what all of you have talked about, which is the interaction of the business community with these needs and whatever, and you were to look at that, not have your hypothesis on how it should work, but actually you have this data set, what hypothesis would you be able to draw on what's working and going well, what's not working and going well? Because part of it is there's this generic idea that business engagement is good. Well, I imagine whenever I hear that, there's some business engagement that's good and there's some business engagement that doesn't work right. Or the rigidity of the educational institution may be such that it's not able to work in that. So what are the factors that actually help you dial up or dial down the efficacy of that interaction?
Let's start this way. I think one of the challenges in higher ed, and having been in higher ed for 40-some years, I can say this, is that sometimes we don't listen to what employers need. My colleagues here get it, and they are working with a variety, but it's important to start by saying, well, what are the needs? What do we even mean by data science? It's so easy to use that term, but when you think about the intersection of computing and statistics and analytics, you can have various levels of quantitative sophistication involved there, for example, or various levels of program experiences needed. And what I would say is that the extent to which people are effective in helping people get jobs will be the extent to which they have listened carefully to what employers say they need. Now, a part of it is this broad education that I think is important. If we teach people through the liberal arts to think critically and to be able to ask good questions, we can listen then to what employers are looking for, and different types of jobs in data science will require different levels of sophistication, whether in computing or in statistical mathematical modeling, whether I'm talking about the T. Rowe Price people or I'm talking about people in cybersecurity at National Security Agency. We need to understand what different jobs will need.
Or BLS.
Yeah, it's very important. And so the analytics.
Are you hiring?
There's a hiring freeze.
A hiring freeze, yeah.
But they will,
I've been trying to keep politics out.
Let me just say this: we cannot. Northrop Grumman is one of our.
On BLS to get political.
Northrop Grumman, Wes Bush, who's also on the Business Higher Education, has said he wants to double the number of students from our campus right now. Okay, we got 1,100 people at the NSA. We can't give them enough people. Whether it's Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin, T. Rowe, they're all hiring as many people as we put out, and it's not just people in computer science. There are people in a broad areas. I will tell you that I have more humanities graduates who are now chief information officers than computer science graduates. Why? They took some courses in data science and in computing information systems, and they can talk to people. The big problem I'm trying to get my computer science majors understanding is nobody understands techie talk. If you talk too techie, then people get intimidated. So you need the combination of skills.
Is that right, Brian? Yeah.
I will just echo what's been said here. We think that data sciences matches so well with a liberal arts college because essentially this is a field of critical thinking with data, right? You need to understand what are the important questions. To know that, you need to work with domain experts who have those driving questions, and the data will never match the questions
And that gets
perfectly.
us to the Shakespeare app.
Oh, I knew you were going to do that.
But I mean, I think part of the question is when you are in the liberal arts environment, so I've been involved with Washington College and Dickinson College, and these kind of classic liberal arts colleges and universities are all struggling with exactly this issue because they're sort of in this middle ground where liberal arts is somehow in a way, like the divisions in campus between the STEM arena and everything else they're big walls. And I think they're beginning to come down. But I take it that you would not have been somebody in the audience that said you were a math and science type when you were younger,
She
right?
could have been either one.
I was both.
Really?
I
Both hands up.
flip-flop.
Yeah, but for the Shakespeare aficionado, what is the pathway into this topic?
I'll give you a Shakespeare-based answer, and then I want to come back to the partnership with industry because that's one of the things that's launched our majors so quickly
Right.
at Smith, but I think I can connect them. Michael Whitmore at the Folger Library, the director of the Folger Library here in DC, is one of the leaders in this field of using quantitative analysis to answer questions that the humanities have been really interested in for a long time. New kinds of evidence and new modes of investigation are available to us when we can use machines to help us read texts. So the Folgers created a wonderful, the digital standard edition of Shakespeare's plays. It's up online, it's open and accessible. And Michael and some colleagues have been studying how genres change, how tragedy, comedy, history are distinct but also mashed up by Shakespeare. And in that study, we can get kinds of evidence that human beings aren't very good at finding. So we've been great as literary scholars at studying character types, big macro phenomena, how those cluster by genre, or really exquisite instances, whether Prospero uses a single word, wife, or wise in The Tempest, and how that matters. But what we're not good at as human beings is reading patterns that are intermittent but persistent over time or large scale. And machines are really, really good at that. So for a Shakespeare
So there
scholar,
is a data analytics for Shakespeare.
there absolutely
class, yeah.
is. For a Shakespeare scholar to bring that body of evidence together with those other two kinds of evidence that humans are good at gives us an enormous capacity to begin to ask new kinds of questions about how genres change or how they infuse each other and integrate. So there's your Shakespeare
That's
answer.
great. And then you had a business.
But the key there is, what are the interesting questions? What are the important questions, the critical path questions to thinking about, if you're a Shakespeare scholar, how genres change? And it's only domain experts that really know that. Computer scientists coming to Shakespeare's plays will typically say, I can count how many of X words there are. But that kind of doesn't matter because we've been doing that in Shakespeare studies for a really long time.
Eduardo, sorry.
So this is what I'm going to say. Finding that important question means bridging into the different disciplines and industries. And that's why Eduardo's right, that the partnership, a really close collaboration, like Smith's with MassMutual, is the thing that allows us to redirect our curriculum in ways that are going to be useful.
Eduardo, are you ready to teach a Moneyball for Shakespeare class down in Miami-Dade?
Well, I'm in conversation with Catherine to see how much talent we can borrow from her institution.
The person who launched our major is started his career working in Major League Baseball as a statistician.
Eduardo,
and
let me...
we lured him away.
Before I go to the audience, Eduardo, let me just ask you, because all of you have been on so many advisory commissions, but again, to ask the question that I asked the previous panel, there's a certain gravitational force in which the relevance and importance of this topic is rising. But every projection that I've read about this shows this amazing talent deficit, this gap. And so it sort of seems that everything we're doing is not enough. So what would you do more of to actually address the gap that seems to be of deep concern?
Well, there is a deficit of understanding in the overall population. If potential students do not really understand what this is all about, it's going to be very difficult to really engage them. But overall, I think there is some positive signs. You mentioned BHEF before, the Business Higher Ed Forum. Before I joined the forum, I always read about, the skills gap and all these things, especially in data analytics, etc. But it didn't become real to me until I would go to the BHEF forums and meetings and really have conversations with CEOs and hear the real challenges they're facing in trying to find the people with the right talent for their business. And that really opened my mind in terms of the potential of collaboration and really coming together to be part of the solution of the problem. There is a significant gap right now. McKinsey and others have made projections for 2018, well close to 200,000 jobs that need to be filled in the whole area of data analytics. And I think more and more institutions are beginning to realize that there is a role for them to play and there is a need for them to do that. It's all about leadership, really. And you have people here who have been leaders, who are always in the forefront of working with whoever they have to work with in order to do that for their students and for the communities they are serving. But I feel as programs like these have an impact in the audience, and a lot of people listen, and that's how you get the word out. Otherwise, ignorance is our worst enemy.
I would just say, on my editorial prerogative here, that again, going around the country as the Atlantic has done and interacted with a lot of communities and having met many parents who really worry about the pathway for their children and where to go, is sometimes it's important to vision out what a life in this looks like. And I'm not sure enough of that happens. But
you know what I say to parents all the time when they're thinking about UMBC? I say this: if your son or daughter comes to UMBC and they take our advice and we get them involved in internships, we promise you that when they graduate, they will not have to come home and live with you. Parents love that because they have plans for that room, all right? I would say that one of the partnerships I tell people to look at is ours with Northrop Grumman. Wes Bush gets it, the CEO, and it involves a multi-level partnership. He gets the point about women in technology, so we have women cyber scholars who are that he's helping to fund, right? We also work with them and their engineers and computer scientists at an inner city school, teaching them about STEAM and the arts and humanities together, and then the idea of partnering with them on the research for cybersecurity all the way over to data science. So you want institutions that are connecting with employers in such a way that there's a multi-level relationship.
Yeah, and not only universities are getting the message, but I think businesses are getting the message.
Yes,
and for example, in Florida, that was the case with us, and we were able to join with a major Nexera, which is a major energy provider in Florida. To date, our bachelor's in data science is the only bachelor in data science in the whole state of Florida, the third largest state in the nation. And that's how difficult the situation is, but some others are awakened to the reality that they need to get in line.
Catherine, what do you tell the parents?
At Smith, we cultivate leadership for new fields. That's what we've done historically. This is a tremendously exciting one for us. And I should say, what do I say to the businesses that we talk to?
Right.
Also, when you diversify, who does something in your field, you accelerate innovation. There's a very close correlation between diversifying who practices a particular discipline or field and change in that field. And as Eduardo said, the biggest challenge we face in higher education is preparing students knowing that what they are going to need is always going to change. And that the pace of change is going to stay very rapid. It's not going to slow.
Fascinating, great discussion. Let's go, so let's go to my friend Brian right here. He's been, but we're going to give you a microphone. We have millions of math types watching you online.
I'm Brian, in case anybody doesn't know. I just wanted to make a comment, and this might make some people in the audience feel better. Our data science program, we designed it. It's in the arts and sciences department. Yeah, and it's 50% women. So we have almost 200 students, and half of them are women, and it's 60% minority. So
let me ask you just a quick question, Brian. If in terms of looking at business and academic partnerships, is there anything you'd like to see tweaked that you think would improve the scene?
Tweeted? Specifically? Oh, tweaked, yeah. I was going to have to come up with 140 words. It was going to be...
No.
So to be honest, from our perspective, it's a bit of a mentality change amongst our faculty members, So we have a tendency to get a little isolated. So we like them... So as practice, we try and get outside the walls as much as possible. We do these types of things. And we have over the course of 2 years, we have, partnerships with almost 50 companies. So all of the way to design the practicum for the students is that as a requirement, if it's possible, to partner with an outside company to use real-world data in order to be able to do that. So institutionally, I think, and you guys seem to be doing a great job of it as leaders, encouraging departments to kind of realize that those connections are beneficial, not only for the programs, but also for
That's fascinating
for the students.
Comment. Other questions, comments? Yes, this gentleman standing in the back. Right. Or we can go right here and then back to you. We'll just do, this is lightning round, so fast questions, fast answers.
Okay. Fast question. I'm Bob Hershey. I'm a consultant. I did a book called All the Math You Need to Get Rich, which has been used at University of New York. And doing great. 5 printings, translated into Japanese and Chinese. And motivates people, showing what's in it for them.
Right.
And I wonder how you're using motivation in your programs.
Good. So let's hold that there. Let me get this gentleman over here that I.
Malcolm Barnes, Parity Press, and WPFW. I have a question for the provost from UMD. I did some work back in the first decade of the 2000s when entrepreneurship was the hot new trend.
Right.
And the strategy was a three-legged stool between engineering, business, and IT.
Right.
What seems to be missing in the talent gap that I'm seeing is that the young students coming out want to get into entrepreneurship. They want to become the producers. They want to become the Puffy Combs.
Yeah, short form.
But they lack the data analytics and how to monetize that. What is your program doing to address that?
Sure. And I'm president of
Let me just get
UMBC.
One more
Yeah,
quick question. Let me take this gentleman here because then we're going to do a quick round robin, everybody. Sorry about that, Freeman.
Sure.
Apologize.
Hi, Juan Munoz Bielas. So I'm actually a recent graduate from Florida State University, and I'm an economist, but I saw a lot of lack of knowledge among the social sciences in the value of data analytics. And what you guys are doing for, reinforce or market these kind of things to the social sciences. Even among economists, it was something that.
So the value of analytics.
Yes, like
So
to get more people
so
involved.
So let me go to all three of you, but it's a remarkable set of questions, which is really how do you, what's in it for them? How do you basically take entrepreneurs to so Freeman, I apologize for interrupting.
Sure. So we like saying UMBC is a place where math rocks. We really mean that. All right. We're one of the largest producers of kids who go to NSA. And what most people don't understand is mathematics, first of all, is a part of the liberal arts.
Right.
We don't realize that sometimes. It is a broad way of thinking. But more than that, getting to data science, I would say this about entrepreneurship. We've got 100 companies on campus, biotech and IT companies, but many of them are cybersecurity companies. And places like Northrop Grumman actually work with us with entrepreneurs to start those companies. And many of them are involved in data science, working with all kinds of other companies. And it's the culture of the institution that makes the difference in social sciences. Have we had opportunities for faculty to go through professional development themselves, to look at best practices? And for us, it's across the curriculum that we're looking at data science, but also on decision-making on the campus. Most institutions have not looked at the big data involving their own campuses to know their students, to know the trends, to understand who's succeeding and who's not. The fact is the probability of a student succeeding in data science at most places is very low because of the lack of sophistication in the programming or the need to rethink the teaching and learning process itself. So there's a need to rethink the culture, not just in our society, but on our campuses as we work with the different companies.
Catherine, your responses.
We've been thinking about that redesign of the teaching and learning at Smith for a really long time, and with a strong emphasis on ensuring that students of color, first-gen students coming in with an interest in STEM are going to be able to persist and perform as well as their peers who've had 4 years of high school math. Right. And that's actually happening. So we're launching the major on top of a kind of deep investigation of how to change the curriculum to be inclusive and to ensure that success.
And is there on the entrepreneurship side and the the sort of personal, what's in it for me kind of thing? Are you able to answer both of these questions about their life ambitions and how this may pay off?
In a way, that's a question about faculty, right? Where is the faculty engagement? And for us, we have a hungry and driven student body that we need to meet where they are, and they have an appetite to be the people who will change the disciplines they go into. They see expertise, some programming, some statistical knowledge enlisted for a question they care about as enabling that goal. And so the faculty are motivated by that.
Eduardo, you get the last word.
In response to the question, as I said before, we believe that just having a baccalaureate in data science is not enough, that every discipline should be exposed to data science, and we're working to making sure that happens. In terms of your question about motivation, I think that something we didn't discuss, which I think is important, is pedagogy. We need to change the pedagogy that we're using, and one of the things that we're doing is putting a lot of emphasis on project-based learning, which means these companies give us problems to solve, the students work on them. There's no better way to engage the students in real-life scenarios to be able to solve problems and work with real problems. And that's another way in which the intersect between business and the university is extremely important, because that kind of collaboration allows our education to become alive and real.
I want to thank Eduardo Padron, president of Miami-Dade College, Catherine Rowe, provost of Smith College, and Freeman Rabowski, president of University of Maryland, Baltimore County. This was a really fun discussion. The app, where they can go to the App Store, what's it called? Luminary Shakespeare?
Luminary Shakespeare. It's in partnership
Does
with
it cost
Folger.
anything, or is it
You can find
free?
it on the Folger's website.
Is it free?
Oh, are you kidding? No.
Free. No? Oh, no. Sorry, guys.
I want you to go to the UMBC CDC. It stands for Chemistry Discovery Centers, and look at how we have redesigned teaching and learning, not only from chemistry, but all the way to the digital humanities. It's important to think about redesigning the teaching and learning process.
And go to
because
Miami-Dade
students
College,
are bored.
too, to make
They're
it
bored,
even.
all right?
Eduardo, thank you. Thank you guys very much. Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you to all our panelists. And now for a session produced by our underwriters, BHEF and PwC, titled Investing in America's Data Workforce. And we're going to welcome to the stage Tim Ryan, Chairman and Senior Partner of PricewaterhouseCoopers, and Peter Weinberg, Founding Partner, Perella Weinberg Partners.
Emily, thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having us. We have just a few minutes here, so I'll try to kind of hurry through just a couple of comments, but I really want you to hear from Tim, who's got a really interesting perch and perspective on the topic that we've been talking about, which is the intersection of higher education and the business community. First of all, just 15 seconds on Business Higher Education Forum. We are an organization of college presidents and chief executives which collaborate to bring higher education solutions to workforce needs. That's what we are at BHEF. You heard Eduardo Padron earlier, who is a member of our group. And today, PwC and BHEF are releasing a joint report on the data science workforce, which you all should get a copy on. It's on our website as well, but it's really a really interesting and precise piece of work, which I think you'd find interesting. So Tim, I'm going to just start with just sort of at a pretty high altitude, and first of all, thank you for being here, and thanks for being part of this effort. When you think about this at a sort of from a broad base, how do you see, from your perch, which is a really interesting one, how do you see the intersection between higher education and the business community in terms of the job outlook? And as part of that, if you could talk about not only that situation today, but perhaps in the next 5 or 10 years as we sort of look forward.
Sure. Thanks, Peter. Good to be here, everybody. So first thing I would tell you is we see a great opportunity. So I was listening to some of the early panels, and while I agree there's challenges, we see a tremendous opportunity because for young people entering the workforce, there's never been more of a time to be relevant. And every job is changing. And we don't see jobs going away, we see jobs being reimagined in very different ways. And whether that be accounting, taxation, consulting, marketing, human capital, jobs are being reimagined. So the opportunity for business and higher education to partner and take advantage of this opportunity and give these young professionals opportunities they never had before is greater than ever. So while things will change, the opportunity to make a difference and help people take advantage of that is greater than ever. And I think that's what the study shows.
One of the topics that came up earlier was really interesting, which Catherine mentioned, which was diversity. Can you talk a little bit about how you see a diverse workforce kind of touching this matter?
So one thing, just personal passion. So that's been a big focus of our firm, big focus of mine personally over the last year or so in terms of getting more Fortune 500 companies involved at not only making it their opportunity to improve, but raising the game for everybody. And you look at the intersection of data sciences, there's more of an opportunity ever to do that. We all know it's well documented that women and racial diversity in tech is woefully inadequate. But it's a great opportunity for the business and higher ed community to come together to make sure we create opportunities to do that. We do that through partnership, we do that through affordability, and we do that through opportunities for people to come together and leverage the ecosystem, higher ed business and the communities to give additional opportunities.
Mm-hmm. And what can we all be doing? I mean, we're all coming at this issue from a little bit of a different angle. What would you say are the 2 or 3 things that we can do to really create solutions in higher education to meet workforce needs?
I think there's a couple of things that need to happen, and they are happening, because the reality is where business is going to go where the opportunities are. And working with higher education institutions is to develop specific skill set programs that meet their needs coming in. So for example, working with various institutions, so PwC, we have a partnership with Carnegie Mellon, and a big part of our business is regulatory and risk and consulting. And we're partnering with Carnegie Mellon to develop a program where you use data analytics, data visualization to provide greater oversight of risk and regulatory. As organizations have other opportunities, they'll work with higher ed to develop opportunities to meet their needs. So there's that partnership opportunity. So that's opportunity number one. The second opportunity is to embed data analytics, data visualization, data sciences into every job. And to make sure that you have, when you have majors, you have it embedded, because that's what we see happening. So for example, financial services or healthcare, technology is embedding in that. So it's business working with higher ed to embed it into their curriculum as opposed to have a specialist. So two panelists earlier, we talked about the fact that it's not just about having a STEM degree, it's about having STEM in marketing or STEM in healthcare. So the second opportunity is to integrate. The third one, and an opportunity that, for example, at Drake University, where every major also has the opportunity to take a minor in data sciences, and because it is embedded in every area. So the opportunity is all three of those, Peter, to again raise the game and take advantage of that goal for growth out there.
Mm-hmm. And how do you, as an organization, I mean, I want to talk in a minute about what you all are doing specifically, which is really incredible. But before we get to that, I mean, you hire 8,000 to 10,000 people a year. You have 100, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of people in your organization, but how do you see this as an organization?
So I think what's important to point out is there's getting the right folks into the workforce, and that's working with higher ed. But as leading employers, we also have the responsibility to adapt our workforce. And so, for example, at PwC, we bring in over 8,000 people a year off campus here in the United States. We'll hit 50,000 people for the first time this year, and the average age is roughly 28. If we're not willing to adapt to make sure that people coming to our organization can be successful, then we won't retain that talent. And a big part of what we do is we change our work environment, we change our culture. So what do I mean? What I mean by that is after we compete really hard on campus to bring these folks in, we have to be willing to make sure they can succeed, which means the way we evaluate, the way we let them work, the way we let people practice their honed skill in a different flexible environment is critically important. So we're not only changing the people we hire, the types of people we hire, we're also changing the way we work. So we do a lot more work remotely. We have an incredibly high culture of flexibility where people can work when they want and how they want to work. In addition to that, we're also investing in our existing workforce, because what we don't want to do is have people come in highly energized, highly innovative with the right skill sets and then hit a wall when they come in, frankly, with people who have been there for a while. So a big part of our strategy is also to invest in our existing workforce to make sure they get more comfortable with the tools that are out there as well. And that creates the opportunity when we win the war for talent off campus, they can succeed when they come there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because you know, there's so many things that we're all involved in different ways, where you have two groups of people who don't necessarily want to come together in the same way. I mean, here, there is that desire, for sure, between these two communities. I mean, Dane mentioned earlier, Dane from the BRT on an earlier panel mentioned the intersection between the University of Maryland and Northrop Grumman Corporation, which has really been a remarkable partnership, which I can say this because I had nothing to do with it. The BHEF really was at the center of sort of coordinating. But it's that kind of dynamic that I think is so critical.
So I think that's right. Just to build off of that, the reality is where there's growth opportunities, businesses are going to invest. And we see a number of universities across the country who are willing to adapt their curriculum to meet business needs. And one of the things that the study shows, it's not just about degrees, it is about skill sets. And we see more and more partnership between business and universities to meet the growing skill set needs that are out there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about PwC and what you specifically are doing in this area?
So thank you for that. So we have invested quite a bit over the last decade in talent development, which is the lifeblood of our business. It's how we meet our clients' needs, and equally important, it's how we meet our purpose statement, which at PwC, it's building trust in society and solving important problems. We just wrapped up a 5-year initiative around financial literacy, which is over 3 million hours and over $100 million investment. What we're announcing today is the next generation of that. and we call it Access Your Potential. And it's a 5-year, $320 million commitment that's targeted at the following. First, it's continued journey on financial literacy, and given the topic of today, it's also to raise tech skills of the students in our country. And we're partnering with a number of other our people in our ecosystem to raise the game and educate 10 million students, to educate 100 educators, because the topic up here early was how do you continue to help teachers stay current, and also it's to get 10,000 kids ready for colleges to go after the careers that they choose. So it's a major commitment in terms of A, how do we actually take advantage of the opportunity to help society, which in turn will help business meet the growing needs of their customers. So we're very excited about it. And one of the things that's really interesting about it is what we have found is the more our people can engage in being part of the solution to this great opportunity, the more they feel like they're part of the solution, more engaged, better performance, higher retention. And so it's something we're really excited about over the next 5 years.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you on behalf of all of us, because it's a great initiative, and congratulations on launching that today.
Thank you.
Emily, I think we're going to keep exactly on time here, and so we appreciate it. I guess we could have a question if you want, but otherwise we'd thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim and Peter. Next, please welcome Randall Kempner from the Aspen Network of Development Entrepreneurs, and welcome back Steve Clements to discuss what these new skills can mean for entrepreneurs and regional economies.
I don't want to be that close to you.
I don't think
Hi,
I'm
everybody.
contagious.
We're back. Here we go. Not that I don't like you, Randall, but so we've been talking this morning about data analytics and where it fits into the scheme of things, and to some degree, we're talking about, how you look at the kind of component pieces and shifting some of the equities that a region may have in its economy, what it needs. And as someone who has focused on entrepreneurship, like the gentleman's last question in this, my question is, where does this fit in the scheme of what you see with this successful and healthy growing economy?
Yeah, so, at the highest level, there's no one skill set that is going to drive economic growth in a particular region. There are some which may be more important than others, and
Right.
certainly and critically, the most important asset that any region can have is its talent.
Mm-hmm.
But you need to think about that in the context of a broader set of dynamics that actually drive economic growth. And so I like to think of sort of a simple model that talks about the assets, the networks, and the culture that exist with any one region. And those assets includes human capital, includes educational institutions, includes physical infrastructure, includes natural resources.
Mm-hmm.
And among those in a knowledge-based economy, undoubtedly, again, human capital is the most important type. But to suggest that any one type of human capital is enough to drive economic prosperity is a little bit too far of a stretch.
Do you buy the line that there is a STEM-related, data expertise-related deficit in the country when it comes to the gap between jobs that are out there and opportunities versus the supply line, the talent supply line we have?
Yeah, I do buy that. But I also buy that there is a lack of critical thinking skills, and I buy that there is a lack of deep scientific and computing skills. So it's not the only gap that we have, but I do think it's instructive, and I'm compelled by the discussion that we've had earlier today about the particular need and the opportunity that exists if we can construct and help build more people with those skill sets.
We had this interesting question asked a minute ago about the teaching of English and the where that sits and fits. So when it comes to the kind of the package of things you get, I'm just sort of interested, what would be if we turned Aspen and your program into a designer of a great model of a package of skills? She asked about how reaching out to one area, but sort of embedding a certain set of skills across the board. How would you do it?
Well, let me try to answer the question. So what are the kind of the skill sets that might help you thrive in a modern economy? Right. I am compelled by BHF's work around the kind of the T-type skills where you're thinking about critical thinking, you're thinking about communication skills. I would add one which I think is the most critical skill that any entrepreneur can have, which is empathy. And I don't know how well you teach empathy, but I know you need it if you're going to be a good entrepreneur, because you need to understand what your customers want in a way that is very deep and very compelling. So those plus general communications and analytics in general, using big data, small data, medium-sized data, you need to be someone who can actually take and analyze actual data to make better decisions. So those would be some of the skills that I would.
Let me see. You do a global program. You run a global program, right? I asked Marco Annunziata where he thought some of the patterns, the models of success are, and he said Germany. He was talking about guilds and apprenticeships. But if you were to kind of look at regional economic development, how to get the picture right, who's doing it best?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one. I spend most of my time focusing on emerging markets. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, I would love to tell you that there are countries in sub-Saharan Africa or Latin America that are doing it better than the greater north. Mm-hmm. And that's not what I'm seeing. I would actually point to regions within the United States as places which I think are doing it best.
Which do you think are great? What would be the standouts?
Well, I think one which is a good one to point to is Austin. It's done a very good job of creating an economy which is based on multiple sectors, with a real commitment, not always successful, but a real commitment to trying to have an educational system that works across the board, serving both low-income and high-income populations. And critically, when you think back to the model I was suggesting about the assets, the networks, and the culture, it has done a good job of building the networks and the culture to help link those assets and make sure the investments in economic assets have a positive result.
One of the things that I had an opportunity to do a couple of years ago was travel with Steve Case. Some of you may remember Steve is the founder of America Online, and he got this big bus. It was actually Mike Huckabee's old bus. Huh. They repainted it, and they called it The Rise of the Rest. And we went to Midwestern United States cities and visited their startup hubs to look at entrepreneurs, what they were doing in tech. We often visited universities. Some of these were in health, some were in agriculture. But Steve Case's notion was that New York and Silicon Valley didn't have a monopoly on all the great innovative talent in the world. And when you went into these places and you saw folks working, particularly in health, on data science and others, it was amazing what was going on there. But all of them had issues of financing, of talent seeking and retention, because their smart people would get drawn to Silicon Valley. And I'm sort of interested in when you look at how, say, Milwaukee or Madison, Wisconsin, or someone like that, St. Louis has been trying to rise in some of these areas. What are the factors, because we're talking about partnerships. There's business, there's universities, there's colleges, there are opportunities. How do you get a community to up its game in such a way that it becomes a place where the value add, all of the layers come in, stay and stick, and grow?
So drawing on that,
make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think it starts from the concept that the most important asset you can have in that community is your human capital.
Right.
And so the question is, how do you create a community that retains and attracts its talent? Now, you've got a real problem if you're in middle America with today's trends. Most of the millennial generation wants to be in big cities. So you're starting at somewhat of a deficit, because most of them are going to be attracted to some of the coasts. So the question is, what can you do to make your community attractive to them? And there are a variety of things you can do. One is, if you're lucky enough, you have an institution of higher education. Not just because it can help train people, but because it creates an intellectual environment that younger people and college-educated people like. Mm. And it's not just the main programs, it's the extension school, and it's the fact that you're doing concerts at your university-sponsored halls. So you really want to focus on the quality of life that you have in that community. And then where smaller cities have an advantage, or can have an advantage, is that they can really double-click on making the connections. Mm. So there's a great example of San Diego, which in the 80s and 90s was not a particularly successful technology hub. You had Qualcomm and not much more.
Right.
But the problem was you had UCSD and USD, but particularly USD, these amazing, crazy surfing professors.
Roger Revelle and those guys. Yep.
But they didn't.
Roger Revelle was the carbon guy. You can't mention his name much around here lately, but
so
change man.
You've got the surfing crazy professors, and then you've got the ex-military real estate guys, and they didn't really talk. Right, so UC San Diego actually created a program called UCSD Connect, which was explicitly created to help link the financing community, the potential financing community, and the technology community, because they weren't talking. And if you can create, and they were successful in building those linkages, if you can intentionally create those linkages, you can get a lot further down the path of building a successful regional economy because you're leveraging all the assets that are there. I often say, particularly in the context of working in emerging markets, that there is not an American metropolitan area that can't compete. The assets that
You've
have.
just said something really, it's very weird listening to this right now because I just spoke for UCSD. We didn't coordinate this at all. In a part of San Diego where in Richard Florida, the writer of The Rise of the Creative Class, he has a new book called The New Urban Crisis. He and I appeared and talked where exactly that was happening. And you saw, the folks that were coming from the university, the scientists, the others, the city and urban thinkers, and folks in all dimensions of science coming over and meeting other parts. And so I think your conversation, because you've sort of taken us to a higher level than the world of data analytics. And part of the theme of today is really the partnerships between the business community and academic. But does this world itself need to figure out a way to do what UCSD Connect has? Does it need to find a connectivity with other parts of the system that may not appreciate its significance?
If by this world you mean the higher education institutions and business institutions.
Well, these guys, the data crowd, these people.
Yeah, let's
are here,
all connect, y'all.
Yeah,
No.
no, but I'm interested in the question of bridging and how you get bridging right.
I mean, I think, look, there's the general concept is absolutely, we need to be thoughtful as economic developers, again, that's my frame, about how you link the various assets which are necessary to help companies grow and create jobs. And that does mean that if you have a certain skill set, if you're the head of data analytics, you're not that helpful if you're sitting in your ivory tower and not interacting with the business community or not interacting with the workforce development community that could help leverage some of the skilled people that you're generating. So I do think, I feel a little bit incapable of giving good advice here other than the general point, which is you've got to get out there. You've got to think strategically about how you're making connections, recognizing that for an economy to grow, it is the interplay of those various assets, starting with human assets, the networks that exist, and the culture that underlie it.
Before I go to the audience, let me ask you a question, because your office is here in Washington, right?
It is.
So you hang out with this crowd across the street in the Capitol. How would you gauge their literacy on these issues? On a scale of A to F?
Should I grade on the Harvard curve?
Yeah, and maybe that's too simplistic and glib a question, but I am interested in this fundamental question of literacy about these questions. I know that when I worked in the Senate for Senator Bingaman from New Mexico many years ago, he was someone who really delved down at every policy issue. Jeff felt he had to sort of educate himself. He was a believer in science and technology and data, and this would have been a great topic for Jeff. He's no longer in the Senate. But I feel, and maybe it's just because I'm getting old, that the actual policy literacy in that realm has decreased, but I might be wrong. And I'm just wondering, because when I asked Eduardo Padron a moment ago, this is a rising issue. A lot of people are here today seeing it rising in significance. And I'm wondering whether, if there's not a literacy about these kinds of issues, is there actually a respect for them up there that need, in other words, do they matter or do they not matter to this question?
Yeah, I think that it's probably greater literacy than we see.
Such a cop-out answer.
That there are Congress people and senators who really do get it, and they certainly get the importance of economic development.
Who's your favorite who gets it?
Ooh, that's dangerous. I'll give you a name because I've been really impressed with him. Brad Schneider, who is a now new again congressman from Illinois, who I've had conversations with, who really is very thoughtful about these topics.
Interesting. We'll have to. Let me go to all of you. Questions, comments, thoughts, reactions? Yes, right here.
I'm Barb Leach, and I'm a recovering, I'm an administration appointee consultant now. And we've talked about the need for education to bring sociology and leadership skills together. But I think there's an underlying issue in the Midwest and perhaps some places in the South that has to do with discouragement and the inability to look at future steps necessary, that we've got a bigger world than we used to deal with. And it's all around the globe, and we aren't going back to we may make baby steps back, but in the long run, we're always going to be dealing with international issues and a changed future. So, how do we give those people the ability to believe again that they are going to have better lives? They missed years of economic recovery.
So this is the question on the aspiration deficit, I guess. Do you have thoughts on that?
Well, my flippant answer would be, let's get them to see the rest of the world. Because if they do see the rest of the world, they might actually be a little bit more optimistic about where things stand in the United States today. And I wish that we could broadly expand the understanding of both the challenges and opportunities that exist for us to engage with other countries in economic activity. One of the things that I am thrilled about in my job is that I get to meet entrepreneurs from Atlanta and from Accra. And what is fascinating is that those people are exactly the same in terms of their cultural values and their drive. And I think that we should help try to imbue those kinds of traits, of risk-taking, of tolerance, of empathy. And if we can have further interactions between people from across cultures like that and see those similarities, hopefully that could drive a little bit more optimism.
Other questions, comments? Yes, hi.
Hi, good morning. Dana DeRazio, thank you. I'm with the National League of Cities, and we're actually addressing this whole issue. I manage the workforce and post-secondary portfolio there. And so we're bringing together chambers of commerce, local elected officials, mayors, et cetera, and then higher eds. And so we're starting to break some of those silos down. And I'm curious in terms of any advice from what you've seen in the field in terms of...
So who do you think gets it best? I mean, not to say I don't want you to necessarily criticize you. I know you can't do that. But when you look at innovation out there and breaking those walls down, and somebody, I'll give you an example. We interviewed recently in a program we were doing on health the mayor of Oklahoma City. I love the mayor of Oklahoma City. Anybody from Oklahoma City? No one from Oklahoma. Anyone from Tulsa? Okay. Oklahoma's big in my world, as you can tell. But he got his community to lose £1 million. He got 40,000 people into a system, and they connected them. And Oklahoma City was looked at as one of the fastest growing cities, but one of the most obese cities in the country. And he got his town to lose £1 million. And then they began working with the regional, sort of the city planning area to begin creating and changing infrastructure so there was more walking room. And to come back to this lady's question on aspiration, what's interesting is it's brought together communities of need, health, education, and others, and they are all of a sudden getting interested in what other cities around the world are doing. So it's connected them to other things in the world. So I'm just interested in when you sort of look at powerful stories of walls coming down, is there anything that pops to mind?
Well, I'd encourage you to follow the 6-city cohort we just launched,
what is
funded by
that?
the Kresge Foundation. It's building equitable pathways to post-secondary and workforce success. And our partners are also with LinkedIn and the Association of Chamber of Commerce Executives. That's a shameless plug, but you asked. So in any case, what we're actually seeing is everyone's in a different space. So those 6 cities, I would encourage you to look at. But everyone is approaching this differently, and we're emerging different strategic plans. We're getting the workforce investment boards. But my question was really around what are some ways that you're seeing in increasing that literacy, but merging the jargon, if you will, right? And trying to really start to create that cohesion. I think the want is there and the desire, but we're starting to do that with our community. So anything you'd want to share about that?
Yeah. I will harken back to a program I worked on a while ago, which I guess had mixed results, but something called WIRED, Workforce Innovation and Regional Economic Development, which was, among other things, a really significant effort to make sure that the workforce people were talking to the economic development people. As you may know, it's like Montagues and Capulets. And it is the most ridiculous thing ever that in this world where human capital is the most important form of capital, we've got an economic development entity and a workforce development entity that have entirely separate bureaucracies. So what was nice about that is money drove people and required them to work together. Now, that's the best incentive I know. Maybe there are others that we can come up with. But I think it's really making sure that you've got folks from the workforce investment boards sitting on the Chamber of Commerce and vice versa, and that the university presidents and their economic development offices need to be sitting on the workforce investment boards. And it's a really conscious and intentional effort to make sure that you are cross-fertilizing those individuals, because ultimately it's going to have to be the people building those connections within a region. We can talk about it in Washington forever, and it's not going to matter.
Any other questions, comments? Let me just finish with one last question about competitiveness, because competitiveness is coming back into the lexicon. It's coming back into the area. If you were to look at competition among all of our friends in the National League of Cities and Regions, what trait, what aspect do you think positions a region best to actually be the most competitive, the most successful?
Honestly, I would say it would be a culture which embraces diversity and promotes creativity. Because industries change so quickly, skill sets which are necessary also change quickly. What doesn't change is that the places which are most successful are those places that allow people with different ideas to come to their communities, where you do not have to have the last name of a community founder to be successful, where you can try and fail and start again, and if you fail for a good reason, that's embraced, it is not discarded. So it really is, can you be a place where you, regardless of color or sexual orientation or gender or religious background or college experience, can you be part of that process? And can you then be in a situation where you've got institutions, formal and informal, that help make the connections so that the creative artist does meet the incredible crazy surfing professor, and that the rich real estate maven gets convinced to do investing in local startups.
And on that, I want to thank Randall Kempner, Executive Director of the Aspen Network of Development Entrepreneurs. Thank you for sharing your insights. Emily?
And thank you, Steve, for moderating these great sessions. And that wraps up our program. I want to thank our underwriters, BHEF and PwC, for making this conversation possible. And before you go, one last request. Everyone should receive or have received an email from me with a short survey, and we also have them on your chairs. It takes less than 3 minutes to finish, and your feedback means a lot to us. So please take a moment to do that. You've been a wonderful audience. Thank you so much for being here. Have a great day.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you. That was great.